Okay, so let's look at a few examples of perimeter, just working out some perimeters of various shapes. And again, I'm not so concerned about formulas here, right? Just use the concept that we discussed in the reading that you should have looked at before the video. So we'll start off with kind of a basic one. So let's calculate the perimeter. And let's start off with a rectangle. So this is supposed to be a rectangle, okay? Please be forgiving of my drawing capabilities. But let's say that we have a rectangle, that one side of the rectangle is length 3 and the other one is length 5. And in fact, let's give it some units. So let's say this side is 3 inches and this side is 5 inches. So go ahead and give the video a pause. See if you can figure out what the perimeter of that rectangle is. I'm going to go ahead and work out my solution now. So we said that the perimeter of a shape is the distance around the shape, or another way to say that is, it's the total length of all of the edges that make up the shape. So in this case, if you said 15, right, then you were thinking 3 times 5 is 15. That's the area, right? That's the wrong concept. We'll talk about the area next week, okay? But that's not the same thing as the perimeter. The perimeter is the distance around the shape. If you said 8, you're thinking, 3 plus 5. Well, 3 plus 5 gets you from this corner to this corner, but it doesn't get you all the way around, right? If you want to get all the way around the shape, then you need to say 3 plus 5 plus whatever this length is plus whatever this length is. And since this is a rectangle, you know that this side should be the same length as this one, and that this side should be the same length as this one. So it's 3 plus 5 plus 3 plus 5. And I think that's 16. Since these lengths were given in inches, our answer would be 16 inches. If you were thinking 16 inches squared, well, there are a couple reasons that that's wrong. If you're talking about square inches, then you're talking about a square unit. And what we're measuring here is not a square unit, it's just a linear unit. We're just measuring the length there. We're not measuring an area, right? So you wouldn't use square units to describe the perimeter because you're just talking about a length, right? You're not talking about an area, right? So you're talking about a one-dimensional length, right? Not a two-dimensional area. And so your exponent is 1, not 2. Another way to see that you should just have inches and not square inches is that when you add, really we should have written inches, right? So we have 3 inches plus 5 inches, right? And you can treat these units of inches just like you would treat a variable. So this is, for all intents and purposes, like saying 3x plus 5x. When you have 3 x's and you add 5 more x's to them, then you have 8 x's in total. You don't have 8x squareds, right? You have 8 x's. And so in a similar way, 3 inches plus 5 inches should be 8 inches, not 8 square inches, okay? So the units don't become squared just because you're adding 2 of them together. Anyway, in any case, this is your answer, right? 16 inches. Now, we could develop a formula for the perimeter of a rectangle pretty easily, right? So instead of 3 inches and 5 inches, let's just say this is x and let's just say this is y, or better yet, let's call this the width and let's call this the length, so W and L, right? So then the perimeter in general for a rectangle would be W plus L plus W plus L. And if you combine like terms, then you get that the perimeter is, well, we have 2 W's and we have 2 L's. So the perimeter is 2W plus 2L, right? 2 times the width plus 2 times the length. Or if you like it the other way around, obviously that's the same thing, right? twice the length plus twice the width. You may have been thinking of that when I first asked you what the perimeter was. You may have thought, it's 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. And that's true if you're talking about a rectangle, right? But if you're just talking about the perimeter in general, then it's the distance around the shape. So let me give you an example of a shape that doesn't have perimeter 2L plus 2W. So let's do another one. So I'm going to draw kind of a weird shape. I'm just going to kind of make this up. So let's go, I don't know, something like this. So kind of sort of like a triangle. And let's label these things. I guess this should be maybe 2, 3, 3, 4, and 5. I'm just making this up. But go ahead and give the video a pause and see if you can find the perimeter of that shape. Okay. So here's my solution. I didn't give us any units to work with. I didn't draw the figure big enough to write units on here. Maybe I could make them meters so that I just have to write a little m. So we'll make all of these things meters. Okay, and it should go without saying, when you're dealing with geometry, it's usually not a safe assumption to assume that the figure is drawn to scale, right? So you can't assume that the figure is drawn to scale, and I'll tell you most of the time, my figures will not be drawn to scale. Okay, but let's see if we can find the perimeter here. Again, the perimeter of this shape is just the distance around the shape. So I'm going to start at this corner, and I'll work my way around kind of counterclockwise, I suppose. So starting in this corner, I'm going to do 4 plus 2 plus 3 plus 3 plus 5, and then I'm back to where I started, right? So that's my perimeter. If I add all these things up, so 6, 9, 12, and 17, so 17 meters, right, is the perimeter of that shape. So here's a clear example where, I mean, these problems are not difficult. If you're sitting here thinking like, why is he making us watch this like very simple thing? Yeah, the concept's really simple. But the problem is, you know, a lot of times you're so hung up on these formulas. You look at a shape like this and you're like, perimeter is 2 times length plus 2 times width. And then you're like, but which numbers do I use? You know, and it's like, well, yeah, obviously you're not going to use this formula for this scenario. It's not a rectangle, right? This is the perimeter of a rectangle, and this is not a rectangle, right? So you just have to go back to the definition. What is the perimeter? And that's why it's important to understand what the perimeter is. It's just the distance around the shape. And once you realize that, well, then you can just add the things up, right? Not a big deal. Really easy problem if you understand what perimeter is. Okay. Let me give you one more. Now this one will be a little more challenging, potentially. So I'm not going to label every single side here. I'm just going to label some of them. And it's going to be kind of another like weird shape, I guess. So kind of like an L shape or a little Tetris type of thing. But let's label some of these. I'm not going to put units on here. If there aren't units labeled, then we'll just use units. We'll use the word units instead of like meters or inches or whatever. We'll just use the word units. But so let's do, let's label this and let's label this. Now this 1 here corresponds to this side, right? It corresponds to this side. So I'm not trying to label this longer side, I'm trying to label this shorter side with a 1. And that's all the information I'm going to give you, but I think it's enough. You should be able to find the perimeter of that shape. So go ahead, give the video a pause and see if you can find the perimeter of that shape. Maybe I should specify that all of these angles here that I've drawn in, they're supposed to be 90-degree angles. So I'm not going to put a little square like in every corner, but you know, there's supposed to be 90-degree angles. So just know that. Okay, so I'll give you a second, see if you can work that out. So go ahead and give the video a pause. Okay, so now here's my solution. Again, I'm going to start. Well, it doesn't really matter where you start, right? You can do the addition's commutative, right? So you can do this in any order you like. If I start in this corner, I would say the perimeter is going to be 2 plus 6 plus something unknown plus 2 plus 1 plus something else unknown, right? So I have a couple of missing sides. If you said, well, the perimeter is 2 plus 1 plus 2 plus 6, nope, right? That would get you the length of this side plus this side plus this side plus this side, but then you're still missing these two sides that aren't labeled. Just because there aren't numbers there doesn't mean that they're not part of the perimeter of the shape, right? So you've got to figure that out before you can find what the perimeter is. So let's do it, right? I mean, so if I want to figure out what the length of this side is, knowing that like all of these angles are 90-degree angles, it's like this side has to be parallel to this side and to this side. And you can see that when I put these two sides together, right, this one plus this one, I should get this one, right? So then the length of this side should be 2 plus 1, right? So that's the length of that side right there. Okay, I'm going to circle it just because, just to kind of show that we had to figure that out. We weren't given that information. But that side length is 3. We also need to figure out this side length. This one's maybe a little bit trickier. Again, we have some sides that are parallel to this one, like we have this side right here. We also have this side right here. But this length cannot be 6 plus 2, right? 6 plus 2 would be longer than 6, and this side right here is shorter than 6, right? So it's not 6 plus 2, but you know, if you kind of extend this line all the way up, right? And you know that from here to here is 6, and that from here to here is 2, then that means that from here to here should be 4, right? Which means the length of this side is 4. Okay. So again, for some of you, you were like, well, that was so obvious. Like, why did we have to go through all that painstaking detail? If it's obvious for you, then great, right? Don't worry about it. You don't have to show all that work. But I went into the explanation just for those who may have not found it quite as obvious. But yeah, you would say this side right here is 6 minus 2, right? So 4. And so now that we have all the sides labeled, we can find the perimeter, right? So the perimeter here is going to be 2 plus 6 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 4. 2 plus 6 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 4. And I have a child coming in to interrupt me. Hey, hold on a sec, love.
Is that a silkworm?
Maybe.
Yeah, Mom said.
No, I don't think so. I might be getting my kids silkworms soon. Silkworms are kind of fun. I might try to make some silk after we've harvested cocoons for 10 years. Anyway, so this is 8, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, right? 18. So we would say 18 units. Okay, and that's the perimeter of that one.